Hey, welcome back to Mistake Man. This is going to be part 4 of my build series of videos on the 1/420 scale USS Defiant. And I've just finished up doing all of the main painting on the hull. That was all done in the last video. And where I'm going from here is first, I'm going to be doing a little bit of touch-up painting on some of the defects in the paint. And then I'm going to I don't think I'll really do any of that on camera. I don't think it's that interesting. But the next thing I'll do after that is to do some of the detail painting. All of the painting I've done so far is just main hull colors essentially, but there are other little details that have some different colors of paint. Most of the painting's done. It's just a handful of things here and there. So I'll go ahead and do that next. And then after that, I'm going to put on a clear coat, a gloss clear coat to prepare for the decals. We'll do the decals, and final step will be to do just a little bit of weathering and a final clear coat, and then it'll be done. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay, so I have done most of the touch-ups to this. I've gone in and remasked off these Bissard collector crystals and filled in that white line that I had around there, just resprayed over that. I had to mask around all this just to make sure I didn't get that on any of the other paint that I've laid down, but I've got those pretty much fixed up. And same thing on the warp nacelles in the back. Just kind of fix those up. And I've left the masking on, obviously, for now, just in case there's anything else that needs to be done. I don't really need to take that off until the model's done. Like there's nothing else I need to do behind those grills or with the grills. Now here I am going to have to take that masking off at some point because I've got to lay those photo etch strips across. Let's see, I've also painted around the windows, touched up a few spots where the paint had chipped off when I removed the little blobs of glue that I used as masking. And up close they still look a little rough. You can see, just like edges of where the paint was lifted off, layers of paint were lifted off, but at least you don't see the white primer that was there before. I just went back in and touched up around each of those windows, and from far away it looks great. So that turned out okay. The only other touch up I really need to do at this point is on some of these panels where you can see just like the pattern of where the masking tape was, where there's a slight difference in color, where it's a little bit lighter on the inside here versus out here, and you see a nice sharp line and even spots where you can see the little jaggedy edge of where the end of the tape was. And so I want to go through and touch those up as much as I can, at least like the really obvious bad ones. And I started doing that on a few of these. These ones right here were pretty bad, and I've gone through, and what I'm doing is I'm just taking, whatever color that panel happens to be painted. In this case, it's D, and this is the thinned version that I used that I mixed up for my airbrush, and I'm just getting a little bit of that, and then just lightly brushing it on, and almost going until like it's starting out wet, but then I just keep brushing until it's almost dry brushing at that point, where most of the paint is out of the bristles, but I'm still kind of pushing it around. And really, the main idea is just to remove, just to soften those hard edges that were, that's what was really obvious about it, was those hard edges. And so I'm just softening those up a little bit, and it's still got a little bit of a mottled appearance, which I'm actually don't have a problem with. Like, it's just going to add to the overall weathering of the ship when I get to that stage anyway. And yeah, as long as I don't mind that at all, as long as it's I don't have those sharp edges that you can see. It ends up looking pretty good. So you can see here, like I've done it to this portion here, but I haven't done it to this portion here. So you can see those sharp edges. But you can hopefully just kind of compare and see the difference between those two. Let me actually just show you on this one here. This is actually color D. It's the same color there, and you can see those obvious tape marks. We'll just go ahead and do what I'm doing there. Just shake it a little bit, just mostly to get some paint up on the lid, because that's what I'm kind of using as my paint pot. It's got bubbles in it, but it doesn't really matter because I'm pushing it around enough that it's popping any bubbles that make it on. So yeah, first I just kind of started off with a light touch, and now I've figured out that I can just go ahead and put a bunch on there and then just kind of push it around. I do want to stay clear of the edges as much as possible, because obviously I don't want to ruin my nice panel lines. And yeah, so now at this point there's a little bit left in the bristles, but not much, so it's transitioning into more of a dry brushing technique. Basically breaks up those hard edges, then it's really doing what it needs to do. Anyway, that's still a little bit dark because it's still wet. As that dries, it'll lighten up. There we go. Yeah, so that seems to be taking care of that issue. So I'm just going to go over the rest of these panels. Not every single panel, but just the ones that have kind of obvious and not great looking edges to them. So I've done a little bit of detail painting so far. I've painted down in these little features, painted the gray color. I didn't originally hit those with the Q color when I went through, because I just taped over that whole panel and didn't leave that open. So I just went in and brushed that up by hand, put a little spot of the white glue on the clear lens that I've got there, just to protect that enough. It was quick. I just put it on there, gave it 10 minutes to dry, came back, brushed over it, and as soon as I was done painting, I just pulled that masking off. I've also painted the phaser cannons the gray color, and I've also started doing some of there's a little feature there that's kind of a darker color. I just use this charcoal, which is almost black, but not quite. It's got some gray to it. So I painted that, and then also these little J-shaped features on the backs of the phaser cannons on the bottom anyway. So that's really all the detail painting I've done up to this point. I've got more to do for sure. Not a lot. There's not actually that much that needs to be done on this beyond, once you've got the main hull colors and the panel colors in, that's the majority of the painting, and the details are just little things here and there. I went through and did the few items that were painted in the copper color. So these photo etch strips that are along the nacelles there, and then of course the little bridge cap there. The only thing left to do with the copper color is going to be those strips that go across the Bassard collectors, and I'll talk about those in a minute. I also just did some other metallic highlights on a few items on the phaser cannons. Let me turn on some additional light here so you can see that. So just little rings around the phaser cannons, and then a black spot in the middle. There's a few tiny little details, like a little copper ring around that circular detail there. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's like these tiny little, on this weird little doohickey, whatever it is, there's some tiny little copper details on there. You can see the kind of reflecting the light there. I noticed there were little details like that on the photos of the studio model, and I thought, I'm going to give it a try. Those are very tiny, and I was able to actually go ahead and get those on there, and they turned out good. I like it. They just add just like the extra little bit of detail that that I like. There's a lot of little color details inside of these little equipment panels here. Now, those pipes that run across are a silver color. There's a couple of tiny little strips that are a gold color. See those little strips there, a couple spots there. Then these really narrow strips here in there as well. There's a few little spots of copper in there. There's some spots of red, and then there's also some green. Those little pipes or tubes there. And that's the border of that little circular feature there is in the copper. Oh, there's a little spot of red there as well. So just these tiny little details. For the colors in there, I just went with a bright red and a bright green. I almost went with like a dark, almost olive color for these green ones, but there's just such a tiny amount of paint there, just these tiniest little details that it was almost lost. Like the green color was almost lost. You couldn't even tell it was green. And so I was worried that the like bright, I think that's like a Christmas green is the color. It's another one of these ceramic coats. And in the bottle, it just looks way too bright and vivid. But on this tiny scale, where there's just a tiny little bit of it, it actually worked great. Like you can tell it's green, but it's not like obnoxious. And same with the red there. I just went with a bright, I think it's called fire red on that. So I got those details in. I added these little panel items in the back, and then also there's a couple of photo etch pieces. There's one on the front, one on the back. You can see the shiny reflection of them there. They're dark, but I've gloss coated them, so they're pretty shiny. And anyway, there's added those in. I'm not gonna. There's also some ladder shaped photo etch pieces that go across from each one of these panels over to the side here. I'm not going to add those until the very end. They're very delicate. I'm worried they might break off and get lost. And also, I'm going to be spraying multiple clear coats. First a gloss coat for the decals, and then a final flat coat when it's all done. And I think there's a potential for those to just kind of get gummed up and gunky looking. And so I'm going to save those until the very end when everything's done, and then I'll add on those little ladder details. There are a bunch of yellow square features around the ship. You can see I've attempted to add one there. So I did mask this one off and attempt to paint it, and I just painted it by hand. Um, and it didn't go that great. I should have started off with white because yellow is one of those paint colors that you could put 3 billion coats on and you're still going to see the color that's underneath it. It just, yellow is weird that way. So it does not look good. So I'm going to have to figure something else out there. I mean, just the masking was kind of a pain because, with the masking of all these panels around the ship, I had panel lines to use as a guide, and so it was really not that hard. But there's nothing on the existing model to help me figure out where those are supposed to be, and so I just got to use reference photos and then a ruler and try and get things straight and lined up and about the right size. And it was a pain, and it took a long time, and just multiplied out by how many I have to do. I might look at another way of doing that. I think there might be decals for that sort of thing. So anyway, I've set that aside for now and just moved on to the rest of the detail painting. But I think I've got all the other detail painting done except for these strips that go across the Bassard collectors. So here are the pieces. I've kind of put them on some pieces of tape. I'm going to go through and just hand brush the copper paint over these. That's what I did for these strips here, and then for the bridge on top, I just hand brush those, and the finish turns out fine. Don't really get brush strokes or anything. So I'm going to do the same here with these, and I've got these uh, testers, little rectangular bottles, square bottles, metallics. They have a really great finish. I really like these testers metallics. They look fantastic. Yeah, look at that stuff. It's gorgeous. It's like liquid metal. Another little bit of detail that I have yet to do is on this little part of the original kit, and you can see I just kind of temporarily put it in place here with the fiber optic for the strobe coming up through there. I'll cut that to length once it's all in place and done, but I've got to paint it first. So I'm going to put coat of primer on there, and then this little block in the middle is going to be the same color as the hull, and then these pipes are like a really dark gray, or the instructions call out for black, but I think that would be too dark um, to my eyes. In the photos of the studio model, it looks like a not quite black, but just like a really dark gray, darker than even what I've got on these other dark gray portions. So I've got like a charcoal or a hippo gray or something like that I can use for that. And then there's also, extending from this block back to this bulkhead, there's a set of even smaller pipes. It's a much smaller diameter than this. And the green strawberry kit comes with some photo etch. So this piece here it's got some etched bend lines right in the middle there, so that gets folded completely all the way over, so that this edge here folds up against this edge here, and so it ends up making this kind of U-shaped piece here. And then there's this piece here, which also has an etched bend line right there in the middle, so this gets folded completely over, so you end up with this hockey stick shape here. And then there's another one of these. It was right here. I've got it pulled off and set aside, but it's exact same shape as this one. So you end up with two of these hockey sticks and this U-shaped thing here. And those end up going right there to kind of simulate those extra little pipes. And you can kind of see here we go, in the instructions for the green strawberry. So you can see here's how they tell you how to fold it. And then one of the hockey sticks goes there, and then the other one goes there, and then the U shape goes in the middle here. So that the U shape takes care of these two inner pipes. It creates those, and then the hockey sticks create these two outer pipes. I mean, I say pipes, but obviously these are flat, and even though you fold them, it doubles up the thickness. They're still flat, and so I don't think I like that. I think that would bother me, just knowing that those were flat like that. So I think I'm going to do something else. Instead, I have this, which is a polystyrene rod, obviously very small diameter. And it is just some of this evergreen stuff, 0.035 inch diameter rod. And I think it looks just about right. You can see back in there's these two little circular features here that have kind of like it's not a hole in the sense that it doesn't go all the way through the bulkhead, but I guess a blind hole in the middle. And then there's also a couple little blind holes, one right there and then one on the other side there for the two outer pipes. And I just kind of fit this rod to what would fit inside those holes nicely. So anyway, so that's what it's going to end up being. So I'll just, for the two pipes in the center, they're just going to be little straight sections that go straight from here back to that block, maybe underneath it, so you don't really see where they join up. And then the two on the side are not straight sections. They have kind of that hockey stick shape where they'll come back and then they'll have a bend. I think I can do that with this polystyrene rod. I've never worked with it before, but I should be able to put a bend in it. We can try it right now, just see how it does. I don't know if it's going to be, how well it's going to take that bend. So let's put one in there and see what happens. It might be brittle enough that it breaks, or springy enough that it doesn't hold, or it might be just fine. And it looks like it's just fine. Might need to do a sharper bend than that, so let's really crank on that. Yeah, I think that'll be just fine. All right. Got this part primed and painted with the hull color. I still have to paint the dark color on the pipes. I did put it on there, as you can see, and I'm starting to just cut out these little bits of the styrene rod to create those pipes. And I've got those two. They're not glued in place yet. I've just kind of cut them to size and put them in place where they're going to end up. So I've added in the decals, those little extra pipes there. I cut them cut to length, and the side one's bent, and painted the hull color, and got them glued in, and I think they look awesome. I think that's a much better result than I would have got with those little photo etch pieces. Yeah, definitely happy with that. So, and then of course you can see I've painted those pipes as well. And yeah, got it all glued in place. Got that fiber optic little blinky light there trimmed to length, and just made a little dome of UV resin to go over that to hold it in place, and also just kind of give it a little bit of dimension to it. I didn't want to cut it, flush to the surface of the part there. I cut it just a little bit longer, and then, like I said, made a little dome of the UV resin there. So anyway, yeah, that looks really good. I have to keep reminding myself to be careful when I pick it up. I've been used to just kind of grabbing it right there, and I found myself grabbing there a couple of times and scolding myself that I can't do that anymore. I've got some. I mean, these are really delicate. Not only are they really tiny, but they're only held on by the tiniest bit of glue, so it's not very strong. So those could definitely break off easily. So I just need to be more conscious about how I pick this model up from here on out. I've also added on the little brass banding on the Bassard collector on this side. I still need to do it on this side, but that turned out pretty good. Man, those little pieces, these little pieces are so fiddly. It's so hard to work with to get them in the right place to get on there, but man, do they look good. That's just a great little bit of detail. I love that. So that's where I'm at. I'm just about to do this other set here, and I'm pulling this guy out again. You might have seen me use this in an earlier video where it's a little magnetic, steel plate with some magnets on these arms. It's like a helping hands, but fully positionable. And I found it's really useful to help me hold the model in unusual orientations if I need something special. So in this case, the best way to apply these so that I'm not fighting gravity is to hold the model basically upright like this. And so I can just set those on there, and gravity's not trying to pull them out of alignment, out of position. So I essentially just set this up so I could just position these arms until they're kind of they're not grabbing the model, they're just like, resting and holding the model like that. And then the arms in the back, I just kind of move those not until they're touching, but just so that if the model does tend to tip over, it's just going to stop itself and not go all the way back, not fall over. So anyway, these things are super helpful for this. I got it for electronics work to hold on to little pieces that I'm soldering, but it's got so many other uses. Got my little pieces here. I think it's going to be what I found easiest on the other side was to take these longer ones and run them across and kind of get that positioned, get the other one next to it without glue, just kind of set them on there to see, what looks about right as far as spacing and making sure they're parallel to each other and the angle looks right. Okay, looks like I got that the right way around first go. Okay, that's just on there temporarily for now. Let's get this other one on there. Okay, I think I got that one right way around. I'm setting these to be about, you can see where the bezel changes direction right there. There's a, like I said, these things are so fiddly. Where there's a bend right there where it changes direction, that corner. And I don't want it to go all the way into that corner, but I want it to be close. And it's not precise by any means, just until it looks about right. And I've noticed, I didn't really notice this until I started putting these on here, but I just assumed that this top edge of the crystal and the bottom edge of the crystal were parallel to each other, but they're not. It seems to be wider right here than it is right here. So it kind of flares out as it goes inward. And so I can't just line these brass pieces up with one edge or the other to make it parallel to the top edge or parallel to the bottom edge, because then it looks weird on the opposite side. It just exaggerates the angle. So I kind of have to find a happy medium somewhere in between. And that's where I found that, like, kind of using these corners, that corner there and this corner over here, as a guide for where to put that. And on the first one, I just kind of placed them until they looked about right. But now on this one, I've got to also compare it to the first one and make sure it's not obviously different on one side or the other. I want it to look symmetrical. Okay, something like that looks pretty close to my eyes. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now I've just got to get those glued, locked into place without shifting them around too much. I'm going to go ahead and put the super glue on that one to get it to stay in place, and I'll put the other one back on top. Okay, so I managed to get that on there. Took a little bit of finicky work, but I'll do some touch up to the copper paint and a little bit to the bezel surrounding the crystal. I think that's basically it for details, except for the little ladders that I'm already mentioned. I'm gonna put those on pretty much the very last thing after I've done all the clear coats and stuff. So I think this, after I'll do a little bit of touch up, and then this is ready for gloss coat for decals. All right, so it's too cold outside to spray clear coat on the model right now. It's been snowing today, so I'll have to wait to do that for another time. But in the meantime, I can start working on this stand. Well, I have started working on it. I need, obviously, to get the wires from the model down through the base, and I have shown this in the past, but I got those two little holes drilled in so I can actually place, that stand in there and have the wires come through it. But then I need to get the wires from there down through the base. There is a bit of thickness in the material there, enough that I could route out a little channel that wire could run through down the middle, well, both of the wires down the middle. So I started doing that. Instead of doing it on the back, though, I decided to, because the wires have to come down through that, I decided to just do that on the front. And so you can see I've actually already routed out that channel that runs all the way down. It's deep enough to run the wires through side by side, and wide enough to go side by side. And then I put this on the base and marked on the base itself where it would go through. And first I double checked that I would actually be able to get through there without interfering with, this structure here. And so I marked that and drilled. So now I've got a hole that goes through. The one can just bend over and go through. This one has to kind of do a double bend. Got to go to the side first and then down. It's not too bad, really. And then those two wires fit through. Just kind of bend those over so they'll stay in place for now. And there we go. Now you can see, hopefully you can see, the wires are completely concealed. So I should be able to just glue a flat piece of styrene over that, and it should cover it just fine. The challenge with doing this is that the wires are coming out of the model. I can't really detach those, and so I have to run them through the stand and basically get the stand set up with the model attached before I can basically close that up with the piece of sheet styrene over that, right? Because I actually have to run the wires through. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do with the base. I like the idea. As far as paint colors go, I mean, it looks like a comm badge, right? So I kind of want to maybe give it comm badge colors with the gold and silver. Yeah, do yellow on the text. For the support arm, I don't know. I might kind of go with the hull color of Deep Space Nine, the station itself, for the arm, and then maybe these recessed panels, a slightly different color. Just kind of draw inspiration from the Deep Space Nine. Don't know if that would look too weird with the two color schemes, the gold and silver for the comm badge, but the Deep Space Nine's kind of like a dark tan. I don't know. I'll have to do a little research on the right colors for Deep Space Nine, but so I could maybe do the border here the same color as the Deep Space Nine as the arm, and leave the inside silver or something. You don't want to go too flashy, I guess, because the Defiant is the star of the show here. Yeah, I'll have to put some thought into that. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with the colors. I have the original decals here from the AMT ERTL kit, and as you can see, they've yellowed quite a bit. Now, I don't know if it's just the backing paper that has got the yellow, or if it's also kind of gone into the decal itself. Um, I'd like to use these decals if they're still good enough. Um, but if they're not, there are aftermarket decals available for the Defiant at this scale. So that's an option if I have to go that route. But I'm going to check first, because if I do need to order some aftermarket decals, I do want to go ahead and get that ordered as soon as possible so I can get those and continue on with the build. So what I'm going to do is there's this little like part number and label down here that's not actually a decal you'd use on the model, but it's still an actual decal, right? They just print it on the same carrier film and mount or you know, put it on the backing paper, just like the other decals. And so I'm just going to use that. And I've got some, just a scrap of sheet styrene here that I'm going to try and put that on and just see. I think if there's any yellowing or discoloration of the decal itself, I think it would be pretty clear on white. So that's what I'm going to do. I guess also I could use maybe some of these numbers, but I think this will be good enough. So let me get that off the paper. So there's that. I'm going to go ahead and put these other decals away just so I don't get any stray drops of water on them. And I've got some warm water here. Just going to drop that in and we'll see how this goes. See what it's like. You can see where the decal was. It's not actually yellowed. It's like all around it, and it almost looks like this residue. Yeah, look at that. Interesting. This might not work. It's going to be really difficult to get those decals off and onto the model without like stirring this crud up and getting it underneath. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty yellow. That does not look great. It's got, and you can see, kind of up towards the top edge here where it's just kind of built up that crud as I scooted it off the backing paper. Yeah, see, it leaves a little bit of crud behind. That water is really yellow. I don't know, maybe I could wash it, rinse it off. Not sure I'd want to do this with every single decal I needed to apply though, especially where some of those are those, red, most of it is just that red striping, which is really thin. It'd be difficult to do this without having it break apart. I'm going to flip this over and go to the other side without that yellow stuff on it. It's better, but still looks a little discolored to me. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but still just looks a little bit yellow. Definitely seems more noticeable to me in person than from what I can see on the camera's monitor. Just pulling some of that excess water out because, maybe it's the water that's yellow. Otherwise, the decal looks okay. It doesn't look like it's really had any other adverse effects other than just the discoloration. Again, I'm not sure that if it's really coming across on camera, but yeah, in person there's definitely a yellowness to it. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be worth trying to use these, unfortunately. I really wanted to, just to kind of, make use of what I had, but unfortunately they're just too old, and whatever starch or whatever that stuff is that they get the use to get the decals to stick to the backing paper is just gone off over time. I mean, this stuff is well over 20 years old, so yeah, I think I'm just not gonna try and use those. I don't want to have to deal with that yellowy look to stuff. So I'll have to get me an aftermarket kit. I'll get those ordered. It has been over 2 weeks since I made the last video where I put on these last details and tested the original decals from the kit. My next step was to put a gloss coat on so that I could do decals. But and the gloss coat that I wanted to use and that I have used here, as you can see, it is now glossy. I used this Duplicolor gloss clear coat. I can't spray this in my airbrushing booth because that's just down in the basement of my house, and the vapors of this would just fill the entire house and be horrible. So have to do this outside. Unfortunately, the weather has not been cooperative. It has been cold and humid with rain and snow and all sorts of windy weather. It has been just terrible weather until just the last few days. But finally, all the storms cleared. It started to warm up. The sun came out, and I was able to take this outside and do some spraying. It's finally good to go. I find it really interesting that before these had kind of like a cloudy finish over them, but now with the clear coat on there, they're almost like perfectly clear, and you can see all the way to the diffusing backing behind there. So kind of cool. Not really the look I'm going for, but I'm gonna, once the decals are finished, put a matte coat over the whole thing, and that'll kind of dull that down a little bit. As you last saw, I tried to use the kit decals. They're just a little bit too yellow to try and use, so I did end up getting ordering some decals. I got these from Decals, and I liked this set because it had the yellow. I was having issues trying to paint those little yellow rectangles all over the ship, and I was able to find some aftermarket decals that include those. And this kit also includes a few extra of these little extra short pieces of the red striping that go in a few places. And I think they said that on the website that the numbers correspond to the original kit numbers, and I checked that they do. So I can go ahead and follow what's laid out in the instructions as far as where the placement is. There are, of course, more decals here than there are in the original kit, so they've got additional numbers, and you just kind of have to figure out where those go from context or looking at the photos of the ship. I've never used decals from this provider before, so it'll be interesting. I don't know. I think I have seen other people, like other build videos by other people that have used decal stuff, and it looks like it's quality stuff, so I'm not really too worried about it. So yeah, let's get this going. I'll get some water and get all set up. So I think I'll start on the top of the model and just kind of work from aft to fore. So the first one on the back is going to be number 11. There's some red striping right there. All right, so decal 11, that is up here. There's our pair of stripes. Now I'm not going to cut those as separate stripes. The recommendation is to cut as close to the printed on decal as you can, just so you don't have that extra little bit of carrier film sticking out. But I'm not going to cut those as separate pieces. That would just be crazy. Then I'd have to line them all up. But right now they're already perfectly parallel and aligned, so I don't want to mess that up. All right, let's see if this is good. There we go. All right. I'm going to put a little bit of water on here. Okay. Let's get some of that excess water out. Okay, there we go. First decal's down. All right. Yeah, those look good. That carrier film is really thin. I mean, not like fragile. It seems just fine to put that on there, but I can barely even see the parts where I did it, where I cut. I left the carrier film in the middle and just cut those ends there, and you barely see those. So yeah, those are good. Okay, I'm gonna keep working my way forward. Don't know that I'm not gonna get it all on camera. I think that would just be too much, take too long. I might show some of the major ones, like this guy that goes around. That's going to be a challenging one. Okay, started working on that large one that's going to go around the bridge and top portion of the ship, and my bin for soaking decals in is way too small for that one, so I just laid it out on my mat and just used a pipette to kind of put a bunch of water on it. So now it's floating away. And then I just kind of dabbed a little bit of water around where it's supposed to go. This is going to be tricky. I think there's too much water here now. I'm gonna try and see if I can wick most of this away, just so it's not like floating. And when I laid it out here, I really didn't take any consideration for the camera shot, so sorry it's kind of out of shot here a little bit, but I think you can see it enough to get the idea. Okay. So let's see if we can transfer this carefully. Okay. Okay, that's close enough, I think. Ooh, there we go. I was making it much harder on myself trying to pull it the other way. Pull it out this way. That's going much better. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, that's half the battle. Okay. I think this portion right around the bridge looks just about right. So now I just got to do the parts behind that. Okay, that's about as good as I'm ever going to get it. So I'm actually really pleased with how that turned out. I was concerned. Trying to get it on there was so difficult and trying to get everything to line up, but no, I like this result. I think it looks good. Is it perfect? Nope, but good enough. I like it. One thing that I've noticed is that the colors are not as vibrant as they appear on the studio model. The reds are a little more muted. I'm okay with that. I think the reds look fine here. The yellow, especially right here where it's over this darker section of paint, the yellow is really muted. Um, when it's over the base hull color, it's much brighter, and that's not bad. But that's the decals are a little bit transparent, so the color from behind is shining through. And in the decal instructions, they do say to apply it over white to get the correct color, tone, and brightness of the decals, but like that's not practical, especially for stuff like this. What am I supposed to do? Paint a white rectangle there and then put it over the top of that? What's the point of even having decals on if you're just going to end up painting stuff? So that's not practical. So I think for that though, for those, I do have the rectangles for the RCS thrusters, and I'm pretty sure these are going to be the same yellow as this, so they would be just as transparent on their own. But I think doubling them up and putting it over the top of that existing yellow square, I think is going to tend to brighten that up quite a bit. So I think it's going to end up looking just fine. Not really too worried about it. The decals are finished. Placed all the rest of them on and put a coat of clear, gloss clear, all around to protect the decals. And yeah, the decals went on really well, uh, really easily. And these decals from Gcals were really great. The quality is fantastic. They're really thin, like in the sense that they don't really like the cut edges of the film, the carrier film, don't really show up at all, except in like very specific lighting. But like right now, when I'm looking at the way the light reflects off this after putting just one clear coat on there, like you can hardly see the cut edges. So it just looks fantastic. But they were not so thin that I didn't have any issues with them, the decals breaking or tearing at all. Like not a single instance of that. I never even felt like they were getting close to doing that. So yeah, I'm really pleased with the quality of the decals. I do wish they were a little bit brighter. The colors are a little bit muted once they've placed on this black or gray color scheme. Other than that, just really, really great quality. I did end up putting these more detailed versions of the RCS decals over the yellow rectangle, so that yellow rectangle was built into this decal that starts from here and goes to here. That was all one piece with the red stripe and then the yellow rectangle and then the red stripe there. And I didn't want to like break that apart or anything, so I just left all that continuous, placed it on there, and then took the more detailed version of the RCS rectangle and put it on top of that. And I was thinking that the yellow on yellow would tend to brighten up the yellow of the decals, but it actually had the opposite effect. It kind of darkened it and almost made it look almost orange. If you can see that, compared to, yeah, like if you compare the pennant here, which is just the yellow, to the yellow on top of yellow there, that's like darker and it's kind of almost orange color. So really interesting. I didn't really expect that, but I guess once it happened, it kind of made sense that like since these decals are kind of have a little bit of transparency to them, I think the yellow color we're getting is more from the light that passes through back reflects off of the surface that's behind it and comes back through, and so we're getting more of a transmission yellow, or at least part of the yellow we're seeing is the transmitted light that's making it through that yellow. And so when we add another layer on top of that, it tends to darken it down because not as much light is going to make it through, and it just combined in that unusual way. Anyway, yeah, so decals look fantastic. Really pleased with the results on that. Up next is, I think I'm going to, while I still have the gloss finish on this, I'm going to do some darkening of the panel lines. And I've got this Tamiya panel line accent color in gray. I've also got it in black, but I think the black would just be way too dark. So I'm trying it out with the gray. All right, I have finished coloring in all of the panel lines, and I think the look is good. It turned out great. It just enhances the panel lines just enough to, really stand out from all angles. And I think it turned out really good. got my base primed and the stand as well. I want to paint the colors on this to match the Deep Space Nine station hull colors. And so I did a little searching online to try to figure out what color that should be, because it's kind of a little difficult to tell from the show. In some shots it looks more of a gray color, but in other shots it definitely has more of a brownish color. So the closest I could find was on a forum. Someone had listed out, it's kind of secondhand information. They said they'd got the actual data from someone at Paramount who worked on the station, on the model, on the show. This is what I found. They said that the color was a Pantone Warm Gray 5C, which is made of 8 parts sand beige, 3 parts dark ghost gray, 3 parts white, and a few drops of black. I know for the stand I'm going to be painting these little recessed portions to be kind of a dark red color, because on the actual Deep Space Nine station, the pylons that go up that have a similar basic shape as this have this warm gray hull color, and then those, like, there are recessed panels that are painted kind of a dark red. So I'm going to kind of replicate that effect here with those. And then for this, I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to go ahead and paint the whole thing with this mixed up color and see what it looks like, and then decide if I'm going to do any variation between these bars out here and the delta, or if I'm just going to have it all be the same color, and then maybe just do just this little raised border that goes around, maybe do a little bit of an accent on that. The text for sure I'm going to paint a color, probably yellow, but I'm kind of going back and forth on maybe gold or silver on that. Haven't decided, but first step, I'll just go ahead and get the color on there and see how it looks. The more I look at this color, it didn't turn out as dark as I was expecting for the whole color of Deep Space Nine. It just looks, I don't know, it looks too bright to me. And so I was considering mixing up some darker paint just to see. And I think I'm probably going to need more paint anyway, because I used every last drop to paint these two pieces, and I'm probably going to want to have some left over for touch-ups, because I'm going to be trying to paint this text, and I'm sure I'm going to have little mistakes around that I'm going to have to touch up. So I'm going to want some paint to do that. And so I decided to go ahead and mix up some more paint, and I just used the same colors as I did before, jute and Bridgeport gray, but I used a different mix. I didn't add white this time like I did last time, and it was almost more of a 1-to-1. And I definitely mixed up more of it. Before I had one of these tiny bottles, and it was maybe about half full, and that was not quite enough to do the whole thing and have some left over. So I mixed up more for that, and like I said, it was almost 1-to-1 of the jute and the Bridgeport gray. I think I ended up putting a little bit more of the gray in, because once I got to about 1-to-1, it looked a little bit too brown to me, and so I hit it with a little bit more gray. And I don't know, that's the color I ended up with. Kind of hard to tell, but it's darker for sure. So I think what I'm going to try is I've taped off these bars off to the side. I'm going to try and keep those in the lighter gray just to see what it looks like, and then paint the darker gray on the delta and the stand. But I'm not going to just do all solid color. I think what I'm going to do is kind of start in the middle. Well, maybe go around the text in the darker, just so that the border of the text is a little bit darker, and then kind of move up into the delta a little bit, so but have it kind of be darker in the middle and then fade to the bright as it gets towards the outer edge of the delta. like I mentioned before, these little inner panels here, I'm going to paint those red. I'll do that first, and then I'll mask those off, and then paint the rest of it with the darker gray. And for the red, I've got this paint that I already had mixed up. It's kind of a darker red. And I had mixed that up for a previous project for making these Christmas ornaments. Well, for painting these that I 3D printed them. And I used this, mixed up this red. So I'm going to do that. This is, I think, going to be a little bit too vivid, too bright for what I want for this even. So, but I'm going to go ahead and just spray the red on there for the panels, and then I'll come back over it and tone it down with probably just some gray. I don't think I want to do black, but maybe just some of this Bridgeport gray to kind of tone down the vividness of it. So that's what I need to do that first before I do the painting of the gray. I want to get the red on there, and then so that I can mask it before I do this. So that's what's up next. Okay, so I've painted the panels with the red color and toned it down with some gray. I was going to go with the Bridgeport gray, but I thought it just probably looked a little bit too light. So I went with this instead, Hippo gray. Brush just kind of around the edges and then a little bit over the middles of the panels just to tone down the brightness of that. I think it turned out good. Kind of hard to say until I get that frame painted back in the Deep Space Nine gray, the Terrac Noir gray. That'll be my next step. And then this I also painted with the darker version of the Terrac Noir gray. And I think it turned out pretty good. It's not perfect by any means, but I think I like it. And then I'm going to be painting metallic colors on the words. I'm going to go with gold for Star Trek. Probably silver or steel. I've got a Tester's steel color. Go with that for the Deep Space Nine. And then for the Defiant, I think I might go with something maybe like a gunmetal or graphite, just a dark metallic. Just to keep with the metallic theme, but just something different from the gold and silver. So, all right, I've got the stand basically installed. I haven't glued it. Not sure that I really need to. It's a pretty tight fit. But the wires are feeding through that trench that I cut out of the edge of the stand here. And then I've placed a piece of sheet styrene over that. You can see that little bit of it there that I have yet to trim. But that runs down the face there, covers that up. I ran a little bit of putty along the edge to kind of clean up that edge. Also did some sanding. Yeah, there's the ship there. I've just done a quick mask over that just so I could airbrush that strip of styrene there in the spots where I sanded and did putty. So I just got the stand color on there now. All I really have left to do on this stand, I need to take the masking off those red panels, and then I'm going to leave this mask here because I'm going to do a quick coat of the matte clear finish on that. You can see I've finished the text, the gold, steel, and then that's gunmetal, and I think it turned out pretty good. With just the metallics, it did look a little bit just kind of monotone and flat, not in the sense of like the finish, but just the simplicity of the look. And the text, especially the steel text, was a little bit hard to distinguish from the gray background. And so I actually went around the edges of every letter and put on a little bit of a, not exactly a clear coat, but a smoke. It's a transparent color, but it's dark. Kind of like the color of the lid here. And so I just carefully went around, traced the edge of every letter with just a little bit of that, and I think it improves the look quite a bit. As far as weathering goes, I did I did try a few different things with just some dark washes, and I did a little bit inside these equipment panels just to kind of darken things up a little bit, and I think it looks okay. But when I tried to do that anywhere else, it just didn't look good. Oh, I guess I did it here as well. Like those like little recessed details inside there, just kind of a dark gray wash, and it kind of brought those out. Not a lot; it's pretty subtle, but I think it looks good. But other than that, it just didn't really look good on the hull, and so I decided not to do any more of that. I'm to the point now where I think the ship looks good as is. I I don't think that there's much that I can do in the way of weathering that would actually improve the look of the ship. And so I'm just going to call it good. So the ship's basically done. Just got to finish up the base. And this model will be complete. The Defiant is done. I finally finished the stand. So I'll take a quick look at that. But I got the colors painted. More of that like a Deep Space Nine gray at the red panels on both sides. And then got it glued on. And then underneath for the power, I just ran the wires through. So there's the red and black wires that I've had all along. I just ran those through and then spliced them onto a female USB that I can just use my little power pack over here to plug into. And then just kind of held it in place with some hot glue. And then I cut out a little notch in the side here to just so the idea is when I'm most of the time I'll store this on the shelf, display this on the shelf with just the power cord tucked up underneath the base like that, so you won't be able to see it. But then when I want to actually plug it in, I'll just lift it up, pull that out, and kind of run the cable through there like that. It doesn't really hold it in place. It's just you know, it's good enough for when I want to plug it in, display it lighted for a little while, and then when I'm done, you can just tuck it back under. So that's the idea there. Anyway, this model is complete. So I just want to share some final thoughts on this project. This project has taken me a long time from very start to now. It's been a long road, but I have learned a lot along the way, and my skills have definitely improved. This is by far the best model I've ever built, and I I love it. I'm really pleased with the results and the outcome, and hopefully with the improvement in my skills, that future model builds won't take nearly as long as this one. But I had a lot of fun just going through this process and building this great little model. Now the USS Defiant is not my favorite ship of all the ships in Star Trek, and in fact I was never really all that big a fan of it before. I mean, I like it, but I guess it would have been down there, down the list as far as on my list of favorite ships. But going through this process and building the model, um, and just gaining such an intimate familiarity with its design, the design of the ship has really grown on me. I'm actually a fan of this little ship now. The design is really cool, and I just never really looked at it in quite the right light until now. So yeah, the Defiant has definitely shot up towards the top of my list of favorite ships in the Star Trek universe. So that's been an interesting experience to kind of just get to know this little ship so much better and gain a new appreciation for its beauty. Anyway, uh, thanks for coming along with me on this journey of building this model, and I plan to do plenty of more build videos in the future, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, everyone.